in Limerick in 1992, and have personally enjoyed his friendship and wisdom, as well as his humour, over the years since then. He has provided to our meeting a level of consideration and thoughtfulness that we all much appreciate. We lent him to Wandsworth Quakers for a number of years, but we're very glad to have him back with us now. We missed him. Eoin comes from a Roman Catholic home where he says thinking and reflection on religion were as normal as regular attendance at Mass. He studied philosophy at university in Galway and later studied theology at Trinity College in Dublin. We certainly get the benefit of those. Between the degrees, he spent 11 years as a monk in the Trappist community of Mount Melleray Abbey, a monastery located on the remote slopes of the Knockmeal Down Mountains in County Waterford. He also worked for a period on social projects and in adult religious education in inner city Dublin. I've known him in his profession of a photographer, where his patience and powers of observation have made for some lovely work. He's married with 3 adult children and a brand new beautiful granddaughter, Saoirse. Mention her and that special smile comes out. He came to Quakers in Limerick nearly 30 years ago when we were a fledgling meeting with a temporary location prior to our building of a meeting house in our current location. He served in many functions, but most recently he spent time representing Irish Quakers on interchurch and interfaith committees. He's just returned to Limerick following 6 years in England, where he was a sojourner member of Surrey and Hampshire border area meeting. Eoin's lecture will share his thoughts on personality and resurrection, challenging us to consider what we might be able to say on the same subject. I quote here, Christ saith this, and the apostles say this. Dare I say, Eoin is also saying something else or this, but he challenges us, what canst thou say? Following what we've heard from Eoin. So what we're going to do is we'll have a period of silent reflection now, and Eoin will speak when he feels ready. When he finishes speaking, we will also have a period of silent reflection before the meeting ends. Today, there will be no questions put to Eoin, but everyone is invited to join him on Sunday afternoon for further discussion. So over to you, Eoin, when you feel ready.
Thank you, Anne. Come and have breakfast. Spoken in the beautiful luminous light that fills the air just before sunrise. This light fills the air below the lightening sky and over the still dark beach. The lake waters are dark. The air slowly fills with light. There is a coal fire, and the disciples gather round to eat. No one asks, "Who are you?" They know it is the Lord, and his words to them, "Come and have breakfast." This is an account of a resurrection appearance of Jesus of Nazareth. No mystical music or Hollywood lighting, just breakfast with his friends at the end of their night's work. The setting on the lakeside at dawn is beautiful. The encounter is down to earth and very ordinary. Jesus and his friends sit down to have breakfast. Across a breakfast of cooked fish, they know it is Jesus. On this moment of recognition rests all of Christian belief and teaching. Resurrection is a challenge. Christian belief often focuses on the sufferings of Jesus on the cross, or the great moral teacher. These we can easily grasp and hold on to. Resurrection is of a different order. It is not easily grasped and is impossible to hold on to in the way we can in which we can hold in our minds Jesus' suffering or his parables. The resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth is the whole source and point of Christian discipleship. Yet it remains elusive in our religious lives, and perhaps for several reasons. From daybreak on the first day of the week, time and place get somewhat out of sync. There is the empty tomb with angels. Go to Galilee, there you will see him. There is the empty tomb with the winding cloth, and the cloth that covered his face set aside. There is Mary and the gardener, the couple on the road to Emmaus, the locked room twice, and there is an appearance by the lakeside in Galilee. There is also the appearance to the 500 disciples that Paul mentions, but the Gospels do not. The resurrection accounts in St. Paul's writings, in the Gospels and in the Acts of the Apostles do not match up as a neat chronology of events. That is because they are not written in that way. It is a mistake to try to read them as matching journalistic accounts, because they are not. The accounts of the resurrection were first spoken before they were written down. How do you speak to others about someone who was dead and is alive? This does pose something of a communications problem. That the apostles had too much to drink is not an unreasonable reaction. When the Gospels were written, they were also written each for a particular audience. They were each pitched for that audience and the situation that community was living in. Matthew's resurrection account presents Jesus as the new Moses, with echoes of Sinai, an earthquake, bright light, and travel to a mountain. These were legitimate spiritual writers' tools to convey the divine truth at the heart of the resurrection event. In Luke, there is a focus on two ordinary disciples walking to Emmaus. In John, there is a series of very personal encounters with the risen Jesus. So when we read the resurrection accounts, we are encountering oral accounts in written format for particular communities so that they might believe in the resurrection of Jesus and more, tell others that they in turn might believe. It takes a special form of listening to discern that of God in the telling of the story. And it is that of God in the story that gives it the power to slip between the ribs into the heart and engender belief through the centuries. This special form of listening requires a particular exercise of one's whole person. When I first mentioned the title of this talk, Resurrection and Personality, to my family, I was pulled up short. What do you mean by personality? I said, I think it's perfectly clear what personality means. Everyone has one. That did not wash then, and I should give some explanation now. When we meet someone for the first time, we do take a reading on who they are. We do it automatically, unconsciously, and depending on the situation, with varying degrees of intensity, insight, and success. We assess in an ordinary way who it is we are meeting. The process continues over time, and we get to know who the person is, what makes them tick, how they act and react. In friendship, who they are and who I am harmonize across differences and similarities. Those we meet are made up of complex structures of intellectual and emotional intelligence. They have a particular history set in a cultural context and particular social background. They have particular talents and gifts and exercise these in a way unique to each one. All of these come together in a way that makes each one unique and recognizable as a particular individual. It is this complex blend that makes the personality of each of us. This is a functional way of thinking about personality. And we recognize those who are strong personalities, or outgoing, or quiet, or emotional. There are as many personalities as there are individuals. And each of us expresses our personality in the way we use the complex of factors that make us who we are. And we can grow and develop or not, depending on how we live and use all the bits that make us up. If we listen to the resurrection accounts with all our personality, we may discover within some way of meeting death with a sense of coming new life. A comment made by an American abbot to his community, life would be fine, except for reality, catches the human situation well. We use the parts of our personality that make us who we are in dealing with the real world. We use our knowledge, our emotional and social intelligence, the cultural riches we have breathed in from our family and society. All these and more come into play as we live out our lives day to day. We may not always be successful in dealing with the realities of life that confront us, but in using as best we can all the precious elements of our humanity, even with partial success, or even with mistakes and failures, we can learn and grow. The world is not perfect, and neither are we. But the true and the good and the beautiful are discernible and to be striven for. And when we engage with life, with all the parts that make us up, we can make life truer and better and more beautiful. And that helps us as individual human beings to be truer and better and more beautiful. But reality is not always true or good or beautiful. We must acknowledge that each of us have some part in that. For some, their actions can make life bad for others and for themselves. For others, their very best efforts fall short. In both cases, some element of their human makeup is shut down or damaged or misdirected. We do engage with the real world around us with both our gifts and our limitations. We are not all powerful or all knowing. What happens around us can have very real impact on how we function as human beings. What happened in mother and baby homes and to single pregnant women is a case in point. Respectability, social judgment, and moral condemnation were rank forces in Irish society for most of the 20th century. Being respectable, having good standing in the community, being well thought of, conforming to moral and religious norms in public were not just the domain of the crawthumper, but permeated the kitchen and the drawing room, the classroom and the workplace. The effect was to restrict whole personality functions, closing down intellectual and emotional life to the extent that we banished the unmarried pregnant, the poor orphaned, to Magdalen laundries, mother and baby homes, and industrial schools. What has been shut down in the human personality to put one's child out of the house into brutal religious institutions? And if we claim that we did not know how brutal they were, perhaps we must admit that we did not want to know. Such awfulness points the need to work so that we keep our whole personality and all our gifts of mind and heart in full health and functioning as best we can. Courage is an aspect of personality that is essential if truth is to be honored and humanity served. Fear is another major shutdown factor. Fear of social judgment and loss of social status or respectability was a major force shutting down humanity so that one's own child could be banished from their home. Fear in society, dressed up as righteous moral judgment, could ignore the plight of vulnerable young women condemned to institutional enslavement. Not seeing or not wanting to see is a symptom of the closing personality, some part of the human person that enjoys the true, the good, and the beautiful has been twisted into a distortion. The true, the good, and the beautiful are a challenge in themselves. The meaning of what we see to be true, the enormity of goodness, and the depth of the beautiful can at times challenge our sense of security by taking us out of ourselves and into new spaces of growth. There is some element of going beyond the familiar, of moving outside our control, of overwhelming us in the wonders of the world around us. There is an element of insecurity and the mysterious built into our experience of the real world. For some, this lights a passion for exploration and expression. For some of us, and at times all of us, the instinct is to retreat to the familiar and secure. For most of us, perhaps we wobble between exploration and adventure, and security and retreat. If our whole personality is engaged, we will manage this oscillation in the general direction of growth and development, and savoring the good and beautiful things in life. The structure of our individual personalities will make this process easier or more difficult to nurture our humanity. Fear in the face of the mysterious in life is dealt with variously. Do we embrace life as it unfolds in all its challenging newness? Or do we stand with the certainties that we have established in our lives? Giving ourselves a break and a little common sense, we may have to do both to stay healthy. The pathway of our lives moves across a space of love and loss, pleasure and pain, youth and age. Our lives are set in the fragile membrane of time, a past that is gone, a future that is not yet, and a present now that disappears as we think of it. Our lives are a brilliant sparkle set in the vastness of distant stars and the aeons of time. We have come into existence and will go out of existence. The promise of the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth is that the love that brought us into existence will hold us in death so that we share in this new life. Death is an assured fact. To be born is to die. We really are in the swallow hard department here. Life would be fine without this stark reality. But there we are. The whole of our personality is faced with the extinction of our personality. Our experience of death is that of the death of others, of parents, partners, children, friends, strangers. Our sense of loss is the indisputable fact that they are gone, no longer there. There is a body, but the person is gone. On the face of it, beyond death, there is nothing. But our very sense of an end point contains some element of a beyond. A terminus, an end, of its nature hints at a beyond. Without this beyond, an end would not stand out. Our very experience of awareness of death as an end point raises in our consciousness a sense of beyond the end. This awareness is articulated in the major religions in various ways, as a circle of life, or a blending into absolute being, or going to paradise or heaven. These understandings can be held to without denying the reality of death. However, the great closers of personality, fear and anger, can lure the Christian disciple into comforting images of heaven, which are candid or idealized versions of our lives now. The depiction of heaven as an infinity of pink clouds populated with harp-playing babies seems to me a place to be avoided at all costs. Is life after death simply wishful thinking to fend off the awful? We are free not to restrict ourselves here to logic and measurement. It is good to honor the full scope of the meaning of our lives, to gather vision of our destiny. The challenge is to keep the whole personality working in the face of death. Beyond death, we do not know what will or can be. Paul of Tarsus put it positively. Eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor has it entered into our hearts, what God has prepared for those who love God. But we still face into the darkness nonetheless. My God, why have you forsaken me? Was not a pious script, but a real cry into this very darkness. Can we see in the risen Jesus of Nazareth anything that can help us see some way into this darkness? What can we take from the resurrection accounts that can point to what may be for us after death? Allowing the differences in the resurrection accounts I've mentioned already, for me, there are common elements across the accounts. There is an encounter. This is an encounter with a real person. Then there is recognition of this person as a particular individual, as Jesus of Nazareth. There is presence, a presence of someone that can be touched and that eats food. The real physical presence is also different in significant ways in time and space. So encounter, recognition, presence of an individual, and being present in a new way are the elements of post-resurrection new life of Jesus of Nazareth. Is it possible that these elements hold good for us beyond death? This hope may throw some light into the darkness beyond death, but it does remain a hope and not a certainty. And hope, by its very nature, cannot be certain. It is also a matter of faith, a belief that reaches out beyond the presenting facts of death. Both hope and faith are religious terms that degenerate into illusion if they reduce our vision to a comfortably tailored view and ramped up version of the real world around us. Both faith and hope in a new life beyond death require as whole and open a personality as we can manage. Intellect, emotion, our family setting and background, education, our cultural and social setting, and then our personal gifts and talents to pull together all of the above need to be kept in play for progress in following as disciples. Much as we need every aspect of our personality to nurture and deepen our relationships, we need every aspect of our personality to nurture and deepen our religious journey, wherever that may lead. There is another factor that emerges from the resurrection period in the New Testament, and this is the active involvement of Jesus of Nazareth in the experience of his disciples. He just turns up and engages in the garden, on the road, in the upper room, by the lakeside. Paul's encounter with the risen Jesus is somewhat different. There is a light and a voice that identifies not just who is speaking, but identifies with those whom Paul is seeking to arrest. All of these encounters seem to match to the life experience and personality of those who encounter the risen Jesus. Just the use of her name for Mary at the tomb. It does take more serious impact to stop the strong-minded personality of Paul of Tarsus in his tracks, but the encounter fitted the personality of Paul. An encounter fitting to the personality of each disciple has been a characteristic of the active involvement of the divine in Christian life. Depending on the makeup of the individual disciple, an encounter or recognition can occur in different ways. For some, it is a clear moment of explicit recognition. For others, recognition grows slowly over time and into a sense of personal presence. In both cases, the sense of an encounter and recognition comes as a gift. The risen Jesus acts to elicit the moment of recognition. There is in the open personality a movement towards beyond, to know more, to savor and appreciate more, to explore and discover more, to reach out. These are the realms of the creative and imaginative scientist, engineer, artist, writer, theologian. While this dynamic of personality can be clearly seen in the gifted, it is the core of us, the most ordinary of us, available in the commonplace of everyday life. This capacity of the open personality can surprise us in unexpected ways by very ordinary events. The drift of leaf fall, the fit of gear and sprocket, birdsong, the sound of children's voices, a small flower by the path, a melody, the sound of wind and sea. Who has not been moved by these in our ordinary lives? Each of us, I expect, has had our personality opened by something very personal to ourselves in our own life situation. But life can be dark, and there are aspects of human darkness where the trained and expert can help best. Ordinary day-to-day living can bring loss of vision and bewilderment. Sometimes we just have troubles that we can deal with, or perhaps not. We do not know the inner vulnerability of others. And in these situations, as Robin Williams said, be kind, always. A personality monitor is a useful tool. That is a capacity to be aware of what is happening on the inside, an eye on my inner workings. What aspects of my personality are working, and to what extent? What aspects of my personality are not working, and to what extent? And in both cases, why? For example, am I shutting down my feelings and overworking my intellect? And am I distorting my vision of what's real as a consequence? We are gifted with self-awareness, and it is a helpful support to keeping our personality working in as open a way as possible. Our personality monitors have an emergency button to defend when life becomes too much, but not to be used to dodge the discomforting and the challenging. A personality monitor is very useful and is well lubricated by a sense of humor. There seems to me to be different kinds of darkness. One where the very personality is at risk of destruction. This can be confused with another darkness where one's self-image is under threat. One's identity and self-image are very different, but under stress can become confused and an inappropriate response follow. Sickness, misunderstanding, the breakdown of relationship can land us in a place where we lose vision, cannot see our way forward. Confronted with the limits of what we think is set and certain, and the possibility of moving on and growth into the new can fade and dim. This gloom is an aspect of growth and development. We are challenged to move out from what we know across a new landscape, where at times we cannot yet see a clear pathway. Faith and hope, without capitals, seem to me to be built into our human condition. Both the lightsome and the dark have an element common to both. In both situations, the beyond remains. And it is in this part of our experience that the active presence of the risen Jesus of Nazareth can be felt. When life leads us to the limits of who we are, there is a possibility that in a form particular to you and who you are, that an encounter or engagement or growing sense of the other can be gifted. This sense of gift is one hallmark that sets this apart from the psychologically induced. Another mark of this encounter is that it is unimaginable. It comes from outside one's experience and is yet recognizable within oneself. Whether the sense of other grows very gradually over time or happens in a particular moment, its effects are that it is an undeniable part of one's life from then on. For some, they are led to particular forms of action, like the prison ministry of Elizabeth Fry. For others, it permeates their very ordinary life in family and day-to-day work. For many Quakers, the silent meeting for worship is the place of encounter with divine presence. And in this encounter, our personality grows. It does change the practice of religion from following codes of morals, law, and authority to a very personal following of the Spirit that reveals the risen Jesus of Nazareth. This personal following of Jesus needs to be set in the context of the Christian tradition and the gathered community. This encounter cannot be prescribed and can happen so differently for different people and further develop over time. It would be rash to say how this encounter and recognition of the risen Jesus takes shape in the life of different individuals. Where we have been raised in a Christian culture, such presence is often shaped in the images of the New Testament. For Francis of Assisi, the image of Christ, poor and crucified, shaped his way of poverty and reform. For George Fox, the opening that none could satisfy his search but only Christ. And this direct connection shaped his preaching and the response of those who heard him and the gatherings for Quaker worship. Figures from history have, by their very nature, a distance from us. And we live in a very different age from 12th century Umbria and 17th century England. Are there images for our own age that will allow us recognize the risen Jesus of Nazareth? I would like to suggest one image that is not new, but does suit the working of the human personality. We are built for relationship. Our personalities are relational. In Jesus' "Do you love me?" dialogue with Peter, following the breakfast on the lake shore, Jesus seems to accept the simple love that Peter offers. There is between them a simple love of friendship. This is the presence of a friend that the risen Jesus of Nazareth offers us. Much like our friends are a presence in our lives, occupy space in our minds, and enrich our lives because they are there. This is different from Paul's Lord of creation or the Lord of judgment coming on the clouds of heaven. Jesus' presence is the quiet presence of someone who loves you and enhances your freedom and love by that presence. It is a presence that is real, recognizable, and is both other and ordinary at the same time. The risen Jesus of Nazareth is a presence as a friend. This is the Jesus of ordinary life and ordinary people. This is a presence that is with us in the last moments of ordinary life. It is good to think that Jesus who has died is with us as a friend in our moment of death. Our hope is that in that moment, when we bring the boat of our life to shore, we will find the beauty of new dawn light and the voice of our friend say to us, "Come and have breakfast."
Thank you very much, Eoin. That has certainly given plenty of food for thought. So I just want to remind everybody that you are all invited to join in a Q&A session with Eoin on Saturday afternoon at 3 p.m. And you will have received the information for how to log in onto that at the same time as you received the information on how to log on to this meeting. It is a different log on, but it is second on the list in that email that you got about how to log on to this. So with that, we will leave you. Thank you very much to everybody for joining us this evening, and thank you very much to Eoin for, I don't know how to describe it, a very, very stimulating talk. Thank you very much indeed.
And thank you.
End the meeting now.